from Wine Enthusiast magazine. This is the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. Coming up on today's podcast, England is sparkling. Contributing editor Anne Kribel, who reviews wines from Austria, Alsace, and England, talks to award-winning winemakers from some of the top English sparkling houses, with a focus on why bubbly from the UK is taking the world by storm.
I think we have inherently in England, because our marginal climate for growing grapes, it is said by one of the greatest wine vineyard consultants, Dr. Richard Smart, the flying vine doctor, that England is probably the most marginal country in the world to grow grapes to make wine.
Plus, more than just Rieslings. Germany's other white wines. Contributing editor Annalie Ijima interviews Rudy Wiest, a premier German wine importer who imports fun, funky wines that are not Chardonnay. And they'll talk about which ones to discover and why.
I would have rather had a fellowship of German wine rather than of Riesling, because there's a heck of a lot more to Germany than just Riesling.
Plus, pared down pairings, wine basics, and more, all coming up on the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. Blue Apron Wine. Every wine club promises to send you tasty reds and whites, but only Blue Apron Wine partners with the wine's best winemakers to get you incredible reds and whites. We're talking Vignoble Boyat Morgon, 91 points from Wine Enthusiast, and Mathiasen, nominated for a 2018 James Beard Award. Get $25 off your first shipment of 6 wines at blueapron.com/corkscrew. Champagne has long been the gold standard when it comes to sparkling wine. But that standard is being challenged by cutting-edge vintners from, of all places, England. Contributing editor Anne Kribel, who reviews wines from Austria, Alsace, and England, takes us inside some of the UK's most distinguished sparkling wine houses in an area that could become the new capital for sparkling wine, south of London.
Wine production is on the rise in England. More than 1 million vines were planted in 2017, the most ever planted in one year in the UK. The key regions are Sussex, Kent, Hampshire, Dorset and Cornwall in the south of England. Sparkling accounts for 68% of total English wine production. I'm Anne Kribel, contributing editor for Wine Enthusiast, and I'm going to take you on a journey to some of the sparkling wine vineyards of England to meet some extraordinary women and men in this burgeoning industry. Our first stop is Sussex. Standing in the vineyard in the most beautifully picturesque English countryside, I can see oak trees, but there were narrow lanes and beautiful farmsteads and cottages with thatched roofs. And I'm here with a winemaking couple.
Hi, I'm Sherry Spriggs. I'm the head winemaker here at Nye Timber.
And Brad Graytrick's a winemaker at Nye Timber, and obviously Sherry and I, as you mentioned, married couple.
Where are we? Because we're in a very special place.
That's right. So we're in the southeast of England in a little town called West Chiltington, and we are in the vineyard that started Nye Timber off over, 30 years ago now, where we have 30-year-old Chardonnay vines.
Nye Timber Estate itself is an ancient farmstead, an ancient estate that was mentioned in the Domesday Book, that was in the possession of King Henry VIII. But let's wheel to this history. How come there are vines here?
Credit can actually be given to an American couple who founded this vineyard in 1988, and they were the first people to plant Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier for the sole purpose of making traditional method sparkling wine here in the south of England. So it was their inspiration from the land here that we're in that really started this whole thing off.
It's a wonderful idea because there were some commercial vineyards here in England since the 1950s, but mostly then what was planted was a kind of bloody-minded determination of German varieties and hybrids like Reichensteiner and Madeleine Angevine. And it's funny that it took 2 Americans to put one and one together. What do you think made them think that this was the perfect spot to grow grapes to make sparkling wine?
Well, really, I think it comes down to the soil of the site that we're in. Running through the south of England, we have 2 chalk ridges, which underneath chalk lay a variety of soils, one of which was called green sand. And both chalk and green sand soils here in the southeast of England are really great soils for growing for traditional method sparkling wine. And of course, you find similar soils in Champagne. So I think they were inspired by the soil, by the land, and they could see that there was so much similarity. There must be potential then for traditional method in this country.
What made you two come on board this project, and when did you come?
Brad and I started at Nye Timber in February 2007, so that's over 11 years ago now. And we were very much inspired to come here by having tasted a bottle of Nye Timber many years ago. But also, very importantly, in 2006, Eric Harima purchased Nye Timber, and he had the real vision and incredible commitment to turn Nye Timber from something good into something world-class and extraordinary. And Brad and I both were very much inspired by his vision for the business.
At the time I spoke to Sherry, she was very excited to have been nominated for a Sparkling Winemaker of the Year award. And here, in her own words,
I'm very humbled and fortunate to have been nominated for the second time at the International Wine Challenge for the Sparkling Winemaker of the Year. And if I win, which we hopefully will find out next week, then it would be the first time anywhere outside of Champagne in the history of the competition has ever won. And I would also be the first female ever to win that award. So our fingers are firmly crossed that this would be something we could soon win.
And yes, she did win. Congratulations, Sherry. Later, we tasted one of their delicious bottles and spoke about the unique qualities of great sparkling wine. Salute, Sherry. Salute, Brad.
Thank you.
We're sitting here in a beautiful barn, looking down on the roses that are planted on this beautiful estate, and we are tasting the classic cuvée of Nye Timber. And what is really striking the moment I smell my glass and when I taste it is an exquisite creaminess. So explain about the creaminess in traditional method sparkling wine.
That creaminess is one of the things that we very much strive for in our wines, and it primarily comes from the lees aging process that we give to our wines before they're released. Now, that lees aging process, what that means is after bottling the wine, it ages together with the yeast that performed the fermentation to create the bubbles, and those yeast contribute these beautiful aromas, some of which could be toasty, almondy, even floral characters, but they also bring a real creaminess into the wine. And you'll particularly, I hope, pick that up when you taste it and feel that creaminess on the palate. It's one of the things that makes traditional method sparkling wine amazing. What I really like in great traditional method sparkling wine is that tension or interplay between the natural inherent crispness that you get from the grapes, from the natural acidity, combined with the characters that you get following from many years lees aging of the wine before it's released. At Nye Timber, we age our wines for at least 3 years on the lees, which is a significant amount of time to really build up those wonderful creamy characters to work with that wonderful fresh acidity. And it's that tension that makes the wine so exciting.
My next stop was Kent. I spoke with Tamra and Mardy Roberts of Ridgeview Estate. They're a pioneering wine family and now one of the biggest and most widely distributed brands in England. We spoke about their family business, the history of sparkling wine, and their amazing success.
I'm Tamara Roberts. I'm the Chief Executive of Ridgeview Wine Estate here in the lovely sunny Ditchling, just overlooking the beautiful South Downs. And I'm here with Mardy Roberts, my sister-in-law, who is our Marketing Communications Director and married to my brother too. So we're very much family business here. And Ridgeview was established back in 1995 by my parents, Mike and Chris Roberts, on the back of selling another business they'd established earlier in their lives. And we're now getting close to our 25th anniversary.
And we have to say, really, it would just, from here, I can see the South Downs. Beyond the South Downs is the English Channel, and across the English Channel, you then have another 2-hour drive to be in Champagne. So we're actually not that far from Champagne. With how many vineyards did your father start?
So we started with the vineyard that you can see just straight outside the window here, and there's another field just to the west of that. 20 acres of planted vines, 25 to 30,000 bottles, the yield dependent per annum. That was the original business plan. And now we're 250,000 bottles to 300,000 bottles per annum. So we had in that plan the 6-year turnaround from planting a grape through to selling our first vintages. And also with that, you've got to remember that even the first year of when you harvest the first year, you get a third of a potential vintage. The fourth year, you might get 50% to 75%. So when you start selling, you're selling very small quantities for the first 3 years, and until that third year of sales, and then suddenly you start to see a little bit more volume. And the business plan was very much around, a small family business, selling from here, from what we call, the cellar door, mainly. So a lot of retail business and a little bit of local trade, which was really how the business plans were put together initially. But with a few knocks on the door from some larger corporations early on, including Waitrose and particularly Tony Laithwaite and Hugh Johnson, with regard to the Laithwaite's wine business they have, we suddenly saw there was a lot more potential there.
And let me explain, Waitrose is a UK chain of supermarkets, and Laithwaite's is an online wine retailer here in the UK. Hugh Johnson, of course, is a wine writer who was very interested in his home selling wine. One of the things that will people strike you immediately about your wines is that they all have London names. So we have Bloomsbury, we have Cavendish, we've got Fitzrovia. Where did that idea come from, Mardi?
So the initial concept came from the idea that my father-in-law helped uncover with Tom Stevenson, who is also another champagne and sparkling wine expert. And it was the story of Christopher Merritt, who was this Englishman who, it's documented in the Royal Society, actually came up with the process of making traditional method sparkling wine, but he was in London. So this was 30 years before officially sparkling wine was seen to be created in Champagne. So my father-in-law and Tom Stevenson were very excited about this idea. So in honour of Christopher Merritt, who documented this process, decided to give all of our names a London connection because Christopher Merritt was a Londoner. And we thought that it was a really lovely idea of bringing sparkling wine back to England and back to the UK, and which has had some fantastic sales opportunities as well. We're now by the Glass and the Bloomsbury Hotel, celebrated in Fitzrovia, and Cavendish is a nice, there's some great accounts in there as well.
Have you found in your international markets that people recognize these names?
I think the names have become, so with our Bloomsbury, it's our Chardonnay dominant wine. It's a lovely celebration wine. It's been used in lots of occasions, including the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So the brand has its own energy as well. Being Chardonnay dominant is also a bit of a twist on the usual Pinot dominant champagne wines. So we love it as that lovely celebration. And I think it does, you're right to represent the Bloomsbury set, because here we are in Ditchling, our local village, and just down the road from Charleston House, where a lot of the Bloomsbury set were doing these creations. So it's a wonderful sort of to be bringing that back to Sussex as well. And it's just been such a wonderful journey, watching perceptions and the quality grow.
Our final stop is in deepest West Sussex, where I chat with Pip Goring, the irrepressible co-owner of Wiston Estate. This ancient English farming estate has been owned and managed by the Goring family since 1743. Its 6,000 acres straddle the chalky slopes of the South Downs and the flat clay soils of the Weald. Pip spoke passionately about what it took for her to persuade her husband, Harry Goring, to realise her dream of growing wine on this family estate, including selling their dairy herds. You must feel very vindicated now, because this was a vision of you. You made it happen. You were the persuasive woman who made these things happen. You said you had to sell the dairy herd in order to make it work.
Yes, well, with dairy herd was sadly 3 years of losing money. And we had 2 dairy herds on the estate, on the farm at one stage. That first one had to go. Then we kept it going. Absolutely gorgeous. Loved being able to pop down with a can and get the milk, organic milk. But it just took a long time to realize, actually, this is just not working. We had to double the herd or say goodbye to it. So sadly, we said goodbye. It was very sad. But we did then have the cash to plant a vineyard. We had no idea how, when you plant a vineyard, it's like having a pot of gold and just pouring it into the soil. And then you just hope that it's going to actually eventually. Dermot came along one day, bounced in on a bright Saturday morning and said, "Pip, if you want a winemaker, I'm your man." And we said, "But Dermot, you're with Night Timber, And he said, no. They're expanding to like 500 acres or whatever they've got. He said, "I want to keep small and boutique." And I think that's another key thing, that we've kept very small, very boutique. And we just love what we do. We love our product. We love what we do. It's family. And so it came from just inspiration. And it's like, I would walk sometimes thinking, is this terrible? Should we be listening to all these advisors and people and stop this whole project? I would literally go, I'd say a prayer, I'd look along, and I know this sounds crazy, but I would see the sun setting on the vineyard, and I would just feel God say, "Pip, this is where your gold is." And I was like, keep going. This is where your gold is. No idea about gold awards. I wasn't thinking of gold awards. I was thinking of finances. But we have these bubbles have won gold. Now we've won the Supreme something for the 2010 Blanc de Noir, which is incredible. I walked along. I remember another was kind of like, "Stop, this is crazy." Walked along in the vineyard with Harry on a day with a few clouds in the sky and misty blue sky. Walked along, and suddenly, and I'm saying, "Lord, what do we do? What do we do?" And this rainbow appears. He said, "Remember my promise to you? Keep going. There's a rainbow in the sky." I said, "Harry, have you seen that rainbow? Where's that come from?" And that is his promise. So it's just gone on with a lot of faith, a lot of prayer, and our beloved son and daughter-in-law are just as passionate as us, and particularly Kirsty with passion for it. So we've been able to hand on the reins to her, because it's now really growing exponentially. And whereas before people would come, it would just like when you first came, it was just like small growing slowly, a bit of this, a bit of that, quite chaotic really, but just kind of happening and very, very organic at that stage in 2008 when we started producing. We've produced our first wine, but it's now got so big. She's now got someone else who works with her, Alex, and we've now changed the style. It's just amazing what's going on. It's just a very exciting story for me that is still unfolding, and I feel I've given birth to something which I'm still watching these bubbles just blowing and flowing and spreading around the world. And I think that when people get an idea of planting a vine or creating wine themselves, however big, maybe 1 acre, whatever, there is just something you can't really describe what it is. But it is like you can't describe giving birth and having a child, but it's the same thing. It's just so precious and special and so fulfilling and wonderful. So for me, it's just been a story which is many chapters still to go in the story of it.
And finally, Pip's winemaker at Whiston Estate, Irishman Dermot Sugrue, spoke quite eloquently about just what makes English wine so very special.
What is so special about English sparkling vis-a-vis other traditional method sparkling wines from around the world?
I think we have inherently in England, because our marginal climate for growing grapes, it is said by one of the greatest wine vineyard consultants, Dr. Richard Smart, the flying vine doctor, that England is probably the most marginal country in the world to grow grapes to make wine, other than maybe Sweden. And Swedish wine is getting better and better. I've tasted it. It's difficult, but it is precisely because of that difficulty in ripening grapes in England. Long, cool growing season that starts early and ends very, very late. And you get this beautiful delineation of flavors, these beautifully defined flavors. It may be difficult to get a high level of sugar maturity from our grapes, but the physiological level of ripeness in our grapes and the phenological level of ripeness in our grapes in terms of the flavor compounds is actually astonishing. It's remarkable. And that is what gives our wines more of an inherent likeness to, say, vintage champagne grapes in terms of their concentration of flavor, lower yields, and expression of terroir. These things tend to happen naturally in England because of the cooler growing season and that level of physiological ripeness that's achieved. And this is the basis for making great wine anywhere. This is the basis upon which we can make fantastic sparkling wines here in England.
So you can see what an exciting time this is for English sparkling wine and the British wine industry as a whole, where plantings have tripled since the new millennium. If you haven't tried a sparkling wine from the UK yet, you owe it to yourself to find out what all the fizz is about. I'm Anne Krivil. Until next time, cheers.
I'm Raina Vitage, Digital Content Director at Wine Enthusiast magazine. And in today's Wine Basics, we're tackling the unwritten rules of tasting room etiquette. Showing up in a party bus, making faces after sampling a wine, or bragging about your 4,000 bottle cellar will not put you on the good graces of any winery. Here are the tips on how to avoid terrible tasting room behavior. 1. Reconsider rolling in with a large group. There's nothing more disappointing than being turned away at the door because you didn't make a reservation or arrived in a vehicle that's not permitted. A big group can overtake a tasting room and change the atmosphere, and not all wineries allow it. 2. Follow restaurant etiquette as a guide. If there's a host stand, check in first. If you're brought to a table with the server, place your order with him or her and be sure to leave gratuity. If it's a big open space with a very long bar, then you can assume you're free to roam. 3. Be unbiased. It's okay if you aren't into a wine, but try it and let the staff explain its context, origin, and food pairings. Run through the whole flight in the order the staff suggests, since a lot of thought probably went into the selection and the order. 4. Savor your sips. Don't rush through and gulp down a wine with hardly a sniff. Also, don't overestimate the number of tasting rooms you can hit in one day. A few quality experiences are preferable to numerous and unmemorable pours. 5. Keep your reactions in check. Exaggerated expressions like shaking your head, calling a wine disgusting, or sticking out your tongue are actions suited for a toddler. If you don't like a wine, simply dump it or give it to a friend. 6. Don't be afraid to spit. Flights may include up to 7 wines. To really evaluate them, you can't drink them all, especially if you plan multiple stops that day. There's absolutely nothing about spitting that's uncouth. It's perfectly normal in wine tasting. Lastly, be a responsible friend. If a companion has over-imbibed, bring them water. Let the staff know and discourage further consumption. After all, an intoxicated person will be much more receptive to a friend cutting them off than a server. I'm Rita Vitage. Thanks for listening. For more Wine Basics tips, visit winemag.com/winebasics.
Blue Apron Wine. Only the best vineyards and winemakers make the cut for a Blue Apron wine box, and every amazing wine is just $10 per bottle. Best of all, each wine comes with the backstory on who made it, where, and why. All so you understand why the wine tastes and smells the way it does. Want to learn more about wine? Blue Apron is the place to start. Get $25 off your first shipment at blueapron.com/corkscrew. Terms and conditions apply. All orders are handled by Blue Apron Wine, Napa, California.
Hi, I'm Layla Schleck, Senior Editor at Wine Enthusiast magazine with Pared Down Pairings, tips for integrating simple foods and flavors into your wine lifestyle. Today we're going to talk about feta because you probably have some in your fridge right now and it might just have to stand in as an hors d'oeuvre one of these days, so you want to make sure you pair it well. First, you should know that not all feta is created equal. In the European Union, feta can only refer to cheese made in Greece from sheep's milk, with some goat's milk allowed. Other countries have a looser stance with the term, which is why there are so many cheeses labeled as feta in the US. The main thing is to look for one made from sheep's milk. Let's dive into some fun facts. Feta is believed to be one of the oldest cheeses. In fact, there's a reference to a form of feta in Homer's Odyssey. The name comes from a word meaning slice. Only about 2% of feta in the US actually comes from Greece. So now that you have some background, let's get into how to pair this cheese. It's got assertive, salty, and tangy flavors, layered with creaminess and herb characteristics. Those are what you want to highlight. It needs a wine with an equally strong personality, high acidity, and good structure. My first suggestions would be a high-acid Assyrtiko from Santorini or elsewhere in Greece, or Sauvignon Blanc from Sancerre or Pouilly-Fumé. And if you're looking to pair a specific feta-centric dish, one of my favorite recipes is a watermelon salad with feta, which I would pair with an off-dry sparkling Xinomavro Rosé from Amintio. Another popular Greek dish is a cheese pie made with feta. This is usually quite rich, spicy, and salty, and would go well with a high-acid aromatic white wine, such as a Moscofilero from Mantinea, or a dry Riesling from Alsace. Thanks for listening. This is Layla Schlack with Pared Down Pairing.
And you're listening to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. Next up, contributing editor Anna Lee Ijima talks to a legendary German wine importer about German wines that you should really know about.
Hi, this is Anna Lee Ijima. As a contributing editor at Wine Enthusiast, I taste wines from the Rhone Valley in France, but also throughout Germany. Today, it's an honor to speak with German wine importer Rudy Wiest. Rudy is one of America's great wine pioneers who began introducing American consumers to German wines starting in the 1970s. His company, Rudy Wiest Selections, is synonymous with really high-quality wines from unique winemakers and exceptional soils. Rudy is known in the United States as one of the most fervent evangelists of German Riesling. But today, I'm asking Rudy to tell us what are the key white German varieties beyond Riesling that American consumers should be seeking out.
Well, I think it's a part of the Pinot trio, as I like to call it. And of course, they're Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris. In addition to that, Sylvaner. And sort of an outsider is the Scheurebe.
Scheurebe, as some people may be unaware, is a crossbreed developed by a certain Dr. Scheu in Germany in the early 1900s, initially for disease resistance, but really embraced for its intense fruitiness and perfume. Rudy's producers, Pfeffingen and Hans Wersching, were two of its original growers.
But that's fairly limited. You know, the major producers of Scheurebe are, why do you really need to say Pfeffingen and Wersching? And they're the ones that actually started it. And I don't know if you know that, but Dr. Scheu did an experimental planting in a place called the Annaberg in the Pfalz. And what's kind of interesting about that, there was a 45 Scheurebe TBA that was made from that plot. And Karl Fuhrmann, who is the grandfather, well, he's since passed away, he's the grandfather of Jan Eimal. He and his wife tasted that TBA, and they were so excited that they took cuttings from the Annaberg over to the Herrenberg vineyard at Pfeffingen. And what's really curious about that, somehow, some way, Hans Wersching, the brother of Mr. Wersching, he also went down to the Annaberg and took cuttings from there and transferred them up to the Kronsberg in Iphofen, his vineyards. And it's a couple of 100 kilometers. He was a very bright guy, and he was the guy that put Wersching on the map as much as anybody. So those two guys started with the Scheurebe, and Mr. Fuhrmann was known as the king of Scheurebe in Germany for quite a few years.
Until recently, even wine scholars thought that Scheurebe was a cross of Riesling and Sylvaner, but Rudy is quick to point out that that's false. Scheurebe is actually a cross between Riesling and Bouquetrebe, an aromatic grape known as the bouquet grape. According to Rudy, Bouquetrebe itself is another Riesling cross that originates from Randersacker, an area in Franken.
And the Bouquetrebe was actually done in Randersacker back in the 1860s. And what's so curious about the whole thing, that Dr. Scheu reached with Riesling over to Bouquetrebe, that, it wasn't a very popular grape, but bouquet suggests aromas. So it turns out, bouquet. That's why I always call the Scheurebe kind of loud. And I think the contributor to the loud is the Bouquetrebe. And what's unique about it is, you get things like lychee, which is really China, and grapefruit, and those are the kind of things that hit you with the Scheurebe. And I experienced that when I called on a store in San Francisco called Bob's Liquor. And there was a guy named Don Gillette was there, and next door to that store was a Chinese market. And it was an Auslese that I tasted him on. He smelled it, and he says, Rudy, you got a second? Yeah, of course. So he ran next door to that Chinese market. He got a fresh lychee and popped it for me. And I smelled it, and I smelled the wine. I just couldn't believe this, the parallel. So I've since been saying Scheurebe is always, I always get lychee first before I get anything else. And an application of Scheurebe is really a very good substitute for Sauvignon Blanc. I did a dinner in Milwaukee, and I didn't have a Sauvignon Blanc, and I talked to Christina Fischer, and Christina Fischer wrote, I think, the definitive book on wine and food pairing. And I said, Christina, what the hell do I do? Excuse my language. And she said, well, do you have a Scheurebe? I says, yeah, that'll work. And it was the match of the evening, believe it or not.
Why should American consumers be seeking out German Pinot Gris, known as Grauburgunder, from producers like Salve in Baden or Becker in the Pfalz?
They just know what to do, and also they have very old vineyards. The Salve Eichberg is the vines are up to 70 years old, and the dirt there is sedimented lava, so it's different from what Becker has. Becker has the classic limestone soil, and he also has older wines, and the better Pinot Gris there almost have a rosé tinge. So it's one of the mutations of Pinot Noir, but it's the one that is closest to Pinot Noir as opposed to Pinot Blanc. You don't see this shade of rosé with Pinot Blanc that you do with Pinot Gris.
Sylvaner is one of my favorite sleeper German grapes. So few people in America know about it, so little is being imported to the US. But when you get your hands on really great examples of Sylvaner, it's really a revelation. Would you say that the strength of Sylvaner in your portfolio is a reflection of better viticulture, lower yields, or greater attention to terroir?
Absolutely. I think it's winemaking and also dirt. The Kuiper soil is very, very prominent where Wirsching is at. The Kuiper soil, that's in those vineyards at Wirsching. Over at Eschendorf, where Sauer is at, it's more sediment and sea life, kind of shell limestone. So it's a little lighter, but yet his wines are so thick on the palate. It's incredible,
Tell us a little bit about wines like Sylvaner and Scheurebe and how they pair with different foods.
I really like Sylvaner a lot. It's a great food wine. And of course, the thing that we do in our company, we visit a restaurant, we look at the menu. We don't just sell wine. We look at the menu and we try to figure out what will work with the food that's coming out of the kitchen. We try to deconstruct the dishes on the menu and then recommend accordingly. For example, in San Francisco, when we discovered the lychee component that was so strong, I went over to Chinatown and I sold Scheurebe Gold Capsule Ausleses with lychee desserts. But I think the dry style really is a very good substitute for Sauvignon Blanc and often a more interesting wine.
So what makes Sylvaner so unique?
Even the basic Sylvaners that we pour by in a glass. Once people get to know them, they're, oh my God, I didn't know. Of course, I do tastings and people tell me, I thought Germany made cars. I'm not kidding you. No, they also make wine. And of course, they make great white wines. They really do. And I think Sylvaner may be a little more difficult than Pinot Blanc.
Pinot Blanc is often overlooked throughout the world as kind of a shyer version of Chardonnay, to which it shares many similarities to. In Germany, some of the best Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc producers like Rebholz are perhaps better known for Pinot Blanc than Chardonnay.
Some of the greatest dry Rieslings that are made on the planet come from Rebholz, yeah. But his Pinot Blanc is as good as it gets, too. He's always at the top.
So let's talk about grapes like Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc is actually quite popular in Germany.
Yeah, we've got some really good Sauvignon Blanc producers, too. One of them is Rainer Schneidmann. The Austrians, who make a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, they score his Sauvignon Blancs 94 points. He's, and I should send you a bottle, Annalie. I have a 13 that's left over. I'll send you a bottle of the Schneidmann Sauvignon Blanc. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's really great stuff.
How would you describe the Sauvignon Blanc, the flavor and the taste? How would you describe it?
It's just a very layered, complex white wine. It really is.
More so than examples that you see from Sancerre or from New Zealand.
There's also find a nutty component in Rainer Schneidmann's Sauvignon Blanc. Rebholz and Schneidmann, I think, make some of the best Sauvignon Blancs in Germany.
I think the biggest problem for consumers, though, is that most American consumers in mainstream America are having a difficult time finding these other German white varieties on the market.
Yeah, it is a problem. But you know what we need to do, Annalie? We need to get these wines by the glass into restaurants. So you don't have to buy a whole bottle, you can taste it with a glass.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Today, thanks to importers like Rudy Wiest, Americans have access to an incredible diversity of German wine styles and varieties, and increasingly at higher and higher quality levels. While Riesling may always be king in Germany, there are so many other uniquely expressive grape varieties that Germany has to offer. We hope you'll take a chance. Maybe try that German Pinot Gris instead of your standby Pinot Grigio, or even a new variety like Scheurebe or Sylvaner that you've never tasted before. This is Annalie Ijima. Thanks for listening.
Well, that's it for today's Wine Enthusiast podcast. To read more about Germany's other white wines, visit winemag.com or pick up the October issue of Wine Enthusiast magazine. You can subscribe to the Wine Enthusiast podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please write us a review. We'd love to hear what you think. We'd also love to stay in touch. Use the hashtag Wine Enthusiast Magazine and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can also send us an email at podcast@winemag.com. The Wine Enthusiast podcast is produced by Marina Vitage and Mike Sargent. See you next time.